As an FBI special agent was my dream job. My whistleblowing was apolitical and in the spirit of upholding my oath. Nonetheless, the FBI cynically elected to close ranks and attack the messenger.
The FBI will crush you. This government will crush you and your family if you try to expose the truth about things that they are doing that are wrong. We are all examples of that.
Joining us now are Steve Friend and Garrett O'Boyle. Thanks for joining us, fellas.
FBI whistleblowers Steve Friend and Garrett O'Boyle both join us now. Gentlemen, so glad to have you on the program. Thank you for your testimony.
We need more folks like you, and I'm sure more people going to be from your background are going to be giving you guys more intel as you're sharing that with the rest of us. We can kind of see that this is becoming normal for them to be held accountable, because I think especially an institution that we pay their salaries, they need to be held accountable.
I think a lot of people do share our beliefs and convictions. I think they just aren't at the point that Steve and I and others have gotten to. They're too afraid.
Thank you so much for being a guest here on PBD Podcast.
Thanks for having us.
How big is that bloody flag that Steve's got? It's the whole wall of his house. Lots of love, guys. Thanks very much for joining us.
Steve Friend, Garrett O'Boyle. Thank you for being with us this morning. More importantly, thank you for speaking out. We appreciate it.
You're in the information age, but facts are in short supply. Reject the noise, ask bold questions, and pursue the truth with FBI whistleblowers and founding suspendables Garrett O'Boyle and Steve Friend. This is the American Radicals Podcast.
It is the American Radicals Podcast on a Saturday. Long last, the weekend is finally here, and we are excited to be part of your Saturday tradition, coming to you live streamed on Rumble. Rumble.com/AmRadPod is where you can find us. And when you do, make sure that you smash the like button and follow the channel. You subscribe. We really appreciate that. If you listen to the audio format of the podcast, do subscribe there and take a second or two. Give us that 5 stars. Come on, help us on those algorithms, folks. We're trying to expand here. But we are excited because Saturday, there's no time restraints, and we saved a topic that definitely will require a little bit more than the 59-minute, 59 seconds that we typically give you on Tuesday and Thursday at 08:30. We're a little bit later, noontime Saturday. Everybody's neurons are firing because Garrett and I want to talk about a little thing about life. Life or Death is the name of the channel of the show today, but we're going to be talking about the issue of life and the problems that are from a policy perspective that we're encountering. There are going to be some redemptive aspects to it today, but this is something that's near and dear to both of us, and we are going to go really into the details here because there is nothing more important than life, which is why I'm glad to have my buddy who shares my sentiment with me today, Garrett O'Boyle. Find him at GOBActual on the socials. Good to see you, my friend. How are you today?
Likewise, Steve, good to be here. It is a topic near and dear to us, and we can start with one of the 10 commandments, thou shalt not murder. The preeminent one regarding the sphere of man. The first couple are dealing with God. You shall have no other God before me, etc. But thou shalt not murder is perhaps the quintessential one regarding humankind and how humankind treats each other and one another. So I think it's a great topic for a Saturday. There will undoubtedly be some dark moments, I'm sure, today, but like you said, some redemptive factors as well.
Well, we're coming off of the Democrat National Convention this week, and there were lots of videos being shared around about all the various components to it. This doesn't come from the DNC, but it comes out of the person who's at the top of the ticket for our first topic today. And I should warn you, get your barf bags ready. Get your AmRad barf bags. We should probably start selling those as merch because we like to send these videos out to people today. We're going to start with a short video clip and just a question about if this was a Freudian slip or maybe just misspoken. Be interested to get your perspective on that, Garrett, and we'll give this a play and then go into it.
When we invest in clean energy and electric vehicles and reduce population, more of our children can breathe clean air and drink clean water.
More of our children, but less of our children because
So going to the heart of the matter, I mean, they tried to clean up for her. She had prepared remarks. Do you think that population was in there, or did she mean pollution?
I mean, it didn't sound like a Freudian slip. It didn't sound like she was misspeaking. It sounded like she was deliberately saying what was prepared for her or what she believed. So I don't know how else you can take it other than at face value. If I misspeak or misstate something or mumble or stutter, I will do my best to reconcile that in the moment. I won't speak right through it. I mean, she spoke very clearly there and didn't harken back to say, "Oh, I didn't mean decreased population, or I meant whatever other word sounds like population."
It's a pretty easy save, seeing as how you're talking about the children having a future, right? Be like, obviously, I didn't mean that, folks. I misspoke there. But she breezed on right through it. She was on prompter reading her remarks. To me, it's even a distinction without a difference, because of the climate agenda is essentially an anti-human agenda. That's what it basically boils down to. They want to bring the standard of living down. The use of energy is going to be so small, and the resources that you're going to be able to consume to support life are going to be so restricted that, by essence, they will bring about a significant decline in population. So maybe reducing pollution or reducing population, again, it's a distinction without a difference from my perspective. But that video, quick, want to go keep on the nominee for president from the Democrat Party, Kamala Harris. This is an actual written form. It's a long form article about her track record. And I think this is worth going into, because this person stands more or less a 50-50% chance of becoming the next president, becoming the next commander in chief, the most powerful person in the world. And as technology progresses, that would mean that she would be the most powerful person in the history of the world. From you look at from there, and I found this over at a website called First Things, and it's just sort of looking at her history in politics, not just from the vice presidency and some of the legislation that Kamala Harris has supported. And it's a pretty damning review of her background. So in March of this year, she visited a Planned Parenthood abortion facility, and that was sort of heralded as a historic moment. She was the first vice president who ever went and visited a baby murder clinic. And she actually went with Tim Walz before he was her VP pick. So they were both there together doing a celebration, and they did this in the aftermath of the Jackson Dobbs decision. And we're talking about some of the bills that she's proposed. Harris has repeatedly declined to offer a hypothetical support to any protection for unborn or even the just born. As a senator, she voted against the Pain Capable Unborn Child Protection Act, which would have provided protections for unborn children at 20 weeks. And she voted against the Born Alive Abortion Survivors Protection Act, which would have required medical professionals to provide care to children who survive an abortion procedure.
Dude. Uh, if you're not paying close attention to what Steve just said, go back and rewind and listen again. This, I'm telling you, this is as evil as it gets. This is the most wicked, most evil agenda in our government. So, someone who tried to murder their child, and then that child somehow miraculously lives, she votes against a doctor's care to help that child live once they're out of the womb. That's as despicable as it gets. I'm plain and simple.
And this is just some of it, Garrett. She's back to this article here from First Things. She introduced what and was the lead sponsor of the Do Not Harm Act. That's a little perversely named.
Yeah. Okay. So I'm going to stop you right there just with the name. I'm glad it's Saturday, Steve.
Do no harm.
We're going to be going a while. I have a feeling. Do no harm act. I'm going to take a wild guess here and say that it's the opposite of that, which that tells you all you need to know, because deceptive language that means the opposite of what they're claiming it means, that's purely satanic. Purely satanic.
Well, this one will hit you hard, because that bill she was the lead sponsor of would narrow the RFRA, the Religious Freedom Restoration Acts. So it was going to withhold religious liberty protections against abortion mandates. So you couldn't even having a religious accommodation to not murder the baby. No, the law compels you to participate in that. She was the original Senate co-sponsor of the Women's Health Protection Act, which would have imposed abortion on demand nationwide at any stage of pregnancy. And she has sought to compel pro-life pregnancy centers to advertise for abortions. And this was before her time in the Senate. As the Attorney General for the state of California, she was a co-sponsor on California's Reproductive Fact Act, and she celebrated the governor signing it into law because it's California, so there are a bunch of life-hating, vile, vicious, Marxist, godless communists. And pro-life pregnancy centers sued Harris over the act's requirement that they disseminate notices of publicly funded abortion services. So if you walked into a crisis pregnancy center, they had to give you a pamphlet. And you can go murder your baby. You don't have to come here, right?
Gosh.
She went to the Senate in 2016. They continued the litigation and actually won on First Amendment grounds. So that law has been struck down, but she was in support of that.
And at what point will there be no judges left who will strike a law like that down? And think of it, they're not looking at it from a biblical perspective. They're looking at it from a constitutional, legal, law school, time as a lawyer, time as a judge.
Compelled speech, right?
Right. And at what point is the jurisprudence in this nation going to get to the point where the compelled speech doctrine, as we've discussed before in our First Amendment episodes, is going to get flipped on its head, and they're going to just say, "Well, we can compel your speech." We're getting there already. There's some laws in New York regarding. I think they're like new laws in New York regarding social media posts and quote unquote hate speech. So when we start seeing laws that are being passed, whether at the state level or beyond, that are saying it's hate speech to talk about people who murder their baby, well, then your compelled speech doctrine is gone, because now they've moved the goalposts and changed the laws to automatically deem that speech unprotected, which we've talked about the categories of unprotected speech before too. Those categories, I truly believe, are going to grossly expand in the coming years. And instead of, I think there's like nine. I think there's 9 categories of unprotected speech. That's going to balloon over time, and your religious freedom to speak, or quite frankly, it doesn't even have to do with religion in this nation. Your First Amendment right to speech is going to just be hindered more and more and more. I'm probably going to be doing this a lot today. Think of the names of the laws, the descriptions of the laws that Steve was just talking about. And this verse, John 8:44, this is Jesus talking. He says, "You are of your father, the devil, and your will is to do your father's desires. He was a murderer from the beginning and does not stand in the truth, because there is no truth in him. When he lies, he speaks out of his own character, for he is a liar and the father of lies." And when you think of the deception, the language, the trickery to get you to buy into what they want, remember that right there. That is purely of Satan and his scheming, deceptive lies. And that is the great trick that is being pulled on the world right now. We're the party of joy, and the names of our laws. We're here for you. No, they want to, oh gosh, dude, we're roaring today. I know it. I could feel it already.
I'm glad you touched on the hate speech aspect to it. The line that I've started using is they have the same vocabulary, just a different dictionary, right? And you can notice it in the language of the laws. You can notice it in the phrasing of the way that they're declaring one side versus the other. Because it used to be, well, you can't say anything negative, right? So you're either pro-choice or you're pro-life, right? That's the way it's going to be. It's a gentleman's agreement. Well, that's out the window. Now you're anti-abortion. Now you're anti-women. And how long is it before that's hate speech, right? And they will apply these laws the way they want. They don't have to change the law. They just need to change the way you understand what the words that make up the law mean to go after what they want. And certainly they're anxious to do that, as you can tell by proposed legislation from the person who stands a 50% chance of becoming the most powerful person in the history of the planet in a couple of months, says that you can murder your baby after it survives the first attempted murder. That's acceptable to her. And the last thing I'll say on Kamala Harris was, and it was referenced in this article, but I went and found the actual White House press release as it pertained to it. She went on a tour, and not like a tour of a museum, but she went on a reproductive freedoms tour.
There's your language again. I mean, right off the bat, reproductive freedoms tour. What does that mean? That means you have the right to murder your baby, in her words.
Well, in her words, quote, extremists across the country. Ooh,
Oh, there we go.
extremists.
There we go, Steve. That's it right there. There you go. So they do. She's telling you. This is what I'll say about her and all sorts of people of her ilk, or even the people cheering for the murder, the baby murder. Believe them when they tell you who they are. Believe them when they say you are an extremist if you don't hold this view. That's what she's saying right there. Extremists across the country. Oh, so it's extreme to believe in the sanctity of life now. Okay, that's where we are as a nation, friends.
Extremists across the country continue to wage a full-on attack against hard-won, hard-fought freedoms as they
Freedoms.
push their radical policies from banning abortion in all 50 states and criminalizing doctors to forcing women to travel out of state in order to get the care they need. How about the baby getting murdered? Is that baby getting the care that the baby needs?
Or the freedom.
Quote, I will continue to fight for our fundamental freedoms while bringing together those throughout America who agree that every woman should have the right to make decisions about her own body, not the government. It's an interesting libertarian argument. She's made it before. Many like her make that argument that the government needs to get out of their uterus, right? But the hypocrisy behind it, and I'm not going to do the hypocrisy game that that too many on the right like to say. Imagine the hypocrisy if the shoe was on the other foot. Yeah, well, the libertarian argument doesn't apply to anything else, like putting a experimental gene juice in your arm, or having compelled speech. I mean, they would be all in for all of that. Bake the cake, bigot.
Yeah,
No
exactly.
free expression,
hmm
except as it pertains to murdering babies. They're all in for that. And I can't think of a society that's on an upward trajectory that embraces it to the extent that it is now. The slippery slope is in full effect here. It's devolved the terminology that we covered when we talked about language aspect to it, but even just the way that we finished up that conversation of in the mid 90s, it was safe, legal, and rare, which is an appeal to empathy coming from Bill Clinton. He was I can feel your pain. And you could maybe get the norms on your side, the norm and norma norms, that look, you don't want her to be, in the words of Barack Obama, have her make a mistake and be punished with a baby. Man, I'm on president quotes all
I
over now.
love it.
But that's why they consistently make the argument that it's what about cases of rape and incest? Those 0.0001% of the cases, whatever the stats are, it's relatively small versus it's just birth control for the vast majority of it. And nobody's ever put that question to them. Okay, you can have that. Rape and incest. I won't give you life of the mother because language, and you're going to say, her mental health. But rape and incest, I'll give you. Okay, give me the others. And they would never take that.
No, never, because it's an all or nothing game. It's a zero sum game for them. It's you will do what we want, no matter what, or you will pay. Uh, Speaking of Barack Obama's quote, he said, "You don't want her to be punished with a baby." Correct? That's what it was. You
Yes.
don't want her to be punished with a baby. You don't want her to be punished with a baby. Think of that. Think of what he's saying. Think of what I read from John about Satan being a liar from the beginning and a murderer from the beginning. Think of Barack Obama's quote, "You don't want her to be punished with a baby." And now think of this. Psalm 127, 3-5. It's probably my favorite section. Whenever a friend or family member tells me they're having a baby, this is what I send them. Children are a heritage from the Lord. You don't want her to be punished with a baby. Children are a heritage from the Lord. Offspring a reward for him. Like arrows in the hands of a warrior are children born in one's youth. Blessed is the man whose quiver is full of them. They will not be put to shame when they contend with their opponents in court. You don't want her to be punished with a baby. You don't want her to be punished with a baby. Children are a heritage from the Lord. Take your pick. I mean, it doesn't get any simpler, quite frankly. You don't want her to be punished. Children are a heritage from the Lord.
Like a baby is an accessory.
Yeah.
It's going to be it's really going to infringe on your rights to, I don't know, go day drinking at brunch with your lady friends, right?
Mhm.
Nobody wants to have that.
And nobody said it's easy. Anybody who has kids knows it's not easy. And that's not the point. That isn't the point for you to be comfortable and easy. It's for you. I don't have it up. I probably should have because I knew we were going to get there. It's in Proverbs. It talks about raising your children in the way they should go, and when they're old, they will never depart from it. It's no one says that that's easy. And guess what? No one. It's also not the government's job to do. Which that man, we're going to open the floodgates here on
Well,
government school
government
and
gets my uterus unless it does survive and the law is not passed where I can murder it post abortion failure. Then the government needs to pick up the slack then. But we'll transition off of Kamala Harris to another woman who is she's a white martyr. There's no question about it. Who she is, a little bit of background on her. I saw this story, and the fact it demonstrates weaponized government and someone who's willing to stand in the gap to a level that exceeds mine, exceeds Garrett's, exceeds any of the declared suspendables at this point. I would love to sit down and award this woman a suspendables lapel pin, but one made of gold because of the sacrifices she's made. And this is this woman. Her name is Eva Edel. She's 89 years old. And this was from the Daily Signal. They got an exclusive interview with her, Garrett. She survived a death camp, and now she's facing down the Biden DOJ based off of the FACE Act. And a little background on Eva. She turned 10 years old at the end of World War II, and she was put into a death camp because she was of German extraction in Yugoslavia, and they pushed them along into that. It was her culture is, they're called, I'm going to butcher this. I believe it's Danube Swabians. They're an ethnic German-speaking group. She and her family were rounded up in the aftermath of the war by soldiers under the direction of the Yugoslavian communist dictator. She was shipped off in cattle cars to a concentration camp. This happened in the aftermath of Never Again, right?
yeah, right.
And at age 9, the camp was for extermination of her kind. Many died from starvation and disease. She slept on straw. She had one dress, very little food. Her mother was actually in forced slave labor, and as a result, she was not inside the camp. So her mother snuck into the concentration camp to rescue her.
God, good grief.
She found her in a pretty dire strait. She was on a pile of rancid straw, starving, too weak to walk. Her Eva didn't recognize her mother. She was just not functioning at that point. But, flash forward 40 some odd years, and she eventually made her way, to America, had a life here. And then in October of 1988, she was kind of woken up by the pro-life protests that occurred outside the DNC. How far have we come?
Dude.
And since that point, she has been a part of more than what she dubs 50 rescues throughout the United States. She's been arrested about 50 times. She calls 50 rescues because she goes to the abortion clinics, the baby murder factories, and prays and tries to encourage women to not murder the babies. So the Justice Department has federally charged her 3 times. She and other defendants were accused of violating the FACE Act, have said that they were not allowed to show images or pictures in their trials. They wanted to make the case that they were saving lives, and the judge would not let them to do that. She had a bench trial in federal court in Tennessee and was found guilty. She's waiting on sentencing there. And her next trial is in Detroit. And I believe she was just convicted there. And she's still going. 89 years young.
I mean, think of this. Think of this woman's background. You've heard us say this before, I'm sure, at least if you've listened for a while, because we talk about our trip that every FBI employee goes to the Holocaust Memorial Museum. The German word is Untermensch. It means subhuman, underhuman, or subman. Untermensch. She literally was Untermensch to the Nazi regime. we've claimed that that's as bad as it gets, that that's as bad as humankind has seen. Maybe there's been similar instances of oppression and wicked government, throughout the ages, or conquering forces throughout the ages. But in our most modern era, it was the Nazis, right? It was, look what they did. How could they ever do that? We'll never go back. Untermensch. She's Untermensch again. Your government has claimed that she is Untermensch again because she stands up for babies who are the preborn. They are human, and you know what? We're gonna get there too. I pulled something because it's part of the debate that it's a red herring. But first, I'm going back. Isaiah 1:23. Your princes are rebels and companions of thieves. Everyone loves a bribe and runs after gifts. They do not bring justice to the fatherless, and the widow's cause does not come to them. If you don't see the parallels between an Israel that was being judged in Isaiah's time and an America that's under judgment now, I guess I got nothing else for you than to go read Isaiah for yourself. But here's this. So the science, it's always the science. What's the science say? What does the science say, Steve? And there's many I could have pointed to, but I pulled this one up because the abstract of it is so clear that I'll just read from it. The title is "The Scientific Consensus on When a Human's Life Begins." And it talks about what they call the fertilization view. So that's when human life begins at conception. That's a biblical worldview. That's a standard that the vast majority of the world has held for, pretty much as long as humans have been around. And it says, as those statements are typically offered without explanation or citation, the fertilization view seems to be uncontested by the editors, reviewers, and authors who contribute to scientific journals. Well, isn't that strange? It seems to be uncontested by the scientists and those who review the findings, and the editors who maybe change words and really dig in to ensure that they're being truthful and factual in these scientifically peer-reviewed studies. It's almost uncontested, it seems. Or it doesn't say almost. It says the fertilization view seems to be uncontested. Interesting, because the world wouldn't have you believe that. Kamala Harris wouldn't have you believe that. The government wouldn't have you believe that. And it goes on to describe that. It says, however, Americans are split on whether the fertilization view is a, quote, philosophical or religious belief, end quote. 45% or a biological scientific fact, 46% or 45% believe it's a philosophical religious view. 46% believe it's biological and scientific fact, which if you want to buy into the science, wouldn't that number be like, I don't know, 99, 98% if it's an uncontested view in scientific journals? And then it says only 38% of Americans view the fertilization view as the starting point of human life. You all can go look into this more on your own. You don't have to take Garrett Boyle's word for it, or Steve Friend's. Oh, okay, he's reading from the Bible again. I get it. He's got an archaic God and an archaic belief. No, we don't. We have an all-powerful, all-ruling, eternal God and a biblical belief. And, oh, look at that. Turns out it's the scientific fact as well. But your government will lie to you and deceive you and claim, oh, it's not. It's about freedom. It's about safety. It's about inclusion, except for the babies we're going to murder. We're not going to include them, and we're not going to care about their safety.
And before we come off the story, you mentioned the Untermensch. Can't help but say language matters, and we can just swap that out for extremists who are fighting against our hard-fought freedoms, right? That would be every bit the exact same view of her that they had of the undesirables, the subhumans. That'll be the next evolution of extremist, right?
That's right.
These extremists, they're not even human. How far are we from that?
Not far. I mean, we see it already to some degree.
All right. I do want to get to this other one. You sent me the story, and then there's some more out that came off of it. But before we do that, let's thank our sponsor today. So let's take a breath, relax, and realize that you can go to m-clip.com. This is M Clip Company. m-clip.com is where you go. These are money clips. You can go there and get them. They are patented technology, 20 years It's an American company, family owned, and they have a lifetime guarantee on them. So if they messed up, they'll fix them. If you messed up, they'll fix it anyway. They're really good looking. They will not break the bank. It's luxury goods, not at luxury prices, particularly because they gave us a promo code. The promo code is suspendable. Suspendable. It will get you 10% off on everything store wide. It could be just your initials monogrammed on them, a Major League Baseball team, or the Suspendables merch, all of it 10% off. Just go to m-clip.com and use the promo code suspendable. Now, we came off of the DNC this week, and there was, in the lead up to it, a conversation that was going on about the historical context. And it was in Chicago, and they were expecting these violent protesters to be there this time. Would 1968 be repeated? Would it be worse? Would it be better? And I said this to you before, and I'll say it to the audience now. Without question, 2024 was going away the far more violent convention compared to 1968. And the reason is pretty simple. There were 25 confirmed fatalities in Chicago, and not in the way that I think most people were anticipating. And that's because Planned Parenthood had a say in it and arrived at the DNC and offered free abortions to the attendees, which is the story that I have here. Free abortions and vasectomies in an 18-foot tall inflatable IUD called Frida Womb to be erected at DNC in Chicago.
Gosh, even the name, Steve. I mean,
They were available. The medical abortions and medication were available on Monday and Tuesday. Vasectomies only offered on Monday. So I guess gender equality wasn't really even a thing for the Democrats here. And here's an adjoining article from Life News that sort of describes what I just said. Planned Parenthood kills 25 babies in free abortions at Democrat convention. Just utterly devastating and demonic. And I can't see that our country is on a healthy trajectory at this point. This is beyond late stage republic sort of things. This is throwing the kids into the fires of Moloch.
It absolutely is. It 100% is that, and it's crazy, dude. It's actually insane. I just got like a tingle on my arms because when you think of how evil this is, they are cheering this. That story goes on to say that that plan, because here's the argument you'll see on Twitter or online. They're mincing words again. They're community noting people who say, "Oh, the DNC was offering abortions." The community notes are, "No, they weren't. No, they weren't. The DNC wasn't doing that. It was Planned Parenthood. They were there. They were there on their own."
Oh, you mean the organization that gets over $600 million a year from the American taxpayer?
Yeah, exactly right. You literally are funding your own demise in this regard because you're killing off future generations. Oh, and also, by the way, not for nothing, you are adding to the blood guilt that this nation has. We have a blood guilt. You think an all powerful God who is very long suffering as well. At some point, that grace is going to run out. I think we're seeing pieces of that right now. You don't get a president like Joe Biden if your nation is not under judgment. You just don't. You would. Israel didn't get King David because they were under judgment. They got him because they were about to thrive, and then they got like a king, like, for you Old Testament scholars out there, Jehoiakim. That's the type of leader you get when your nation is under judgment. You get a Joe Biden, and half the people are applauding that. And now you have this Planned Parenthood, 25 babies later. Later, it goes on to say that they offered 40 throughout the week, and all of the appointments were filled up. So I think it's safe to conclude that they murdered 40 babies. They murdered 40 people during the week at the DNC. Very violent, very violent. And we have a blood guilt for that. And you mentioned the Old Testament false god that the babies were being offered to. Maybe I'll read that section later because you're absolutely right. That's what it is. That's where, our thumbnail, that's kind of where that imagery was drawn from. We did a little modern rendition of it to some degree, but I'm going to go here. Psalm 139. I just mentioned King David. Here we go. verses 13 through 16. For you formed my inward parts. You knitted me together in my mother's womb. I praise you, for I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Wonderful are your works. My soul knows it very well. My frame was not hidden from you when I was being made in secret, intricately woven in the depths of the earth. Your eyes saw my unformed substance. In your book were written, every one of them, the days that were formed for me, when as yet there was none of them. What's David saying there? He's talking about God's sovereignty. He's talking about God creating him before anyone even knew he was going to exist. God did. God knew. And that's true about you. And that's true about every single person that's ever lived or ever will live. And we're taking it upon ourselves to snuff that out, to snuff that design out, to snuff out the days that were formed for me when as yet there were none of them, because that's what we're doing. We're playing God and we're acting like it's okay and that it's for freedom. Good grief, man. Good grief. Galatians 5:1 says it's for freedom that Christ has set us free. Stand firm then and do not let yourselves be burdened again by a yoke of slavery. What's that? The yoke of slavery is our sin. And boy, do we have a lot of sin as a nation regarding just the murder of the preborn alone.
On Friendly Friday on Kyle Serafin's show, we were talking about the Kamala Harris speech at the end of the DNC. And I couldn't help but notice, look, it was an effective speech for people who are not really listening in to what she was saying or don't know her history or background. And that's what she's got to do. She's got to play to the masses to get as many votes as she can. And she'll get them 80 plus million, no question about it. But excuse me, she referenced her mom. And I don't know if this is true or not. She's a politician. She's probably lying. But she said her mom came to America to develop the cure for breast cancer. And then she referenced that later on in the speech and talked about women's health. And I couldn't think about how evil that is, where you took a goal that your mother had, an aspirational goal to help people, to save lives, and you're going to weave this into the message of no, it's actually about ending them. And that's what she did very effectively, actually.
Yeah, it's as evil and wicked as it comes, and that goes to what we talk about with language, right? Is they manipulate and twist. Like it goes to that deception. We've been talking about it like the whole episode. It goes to the deception of the truth, and they're playing on that. They know you've got a busy life. They know you're not tuned into every little piece, every little thing, and they're trying to pull it over on you as much as they are trying to trick you into buying into these myths. That's what they are. They're myths. They're claiming they're true, that a man can be a woman, that a woman can be a man, that you could be nothing. You can be asexual. You could be, a wolf, like Matt Walsh did in his documentary "What's a Woman." You got this person claiming they're a wolf. No, that's not how facts work. You can't just make things up and claim them to be true. You can't just say, "Well, it's for freedom, and so life doesn't matter." That's not how any of this works. It's not how any of it ever has worked. Don't be deceived by it. Don't be fooled. Don't be tricked into the myth that they're trying to sell you.
So out of the federal nexus here, I've got two examples at state levels that I think are worth going into. And the first one is interesting because it involves the life issue and the language issue. And I got this from Arizona. And then Arizona is going to be a swing state in the upcoming election. Arizona could decide if Kamala Harris is the most powerful person in history, right? And this comes from Catholic Vote. This is a this is a state judge in Arizona sides with Arizona pro-abortion group to remove, quote, unborn human being, unquote, on the abortion ballot pamphlets that they're being handed out. So what's the details of this? There's a pro-abortion initiative, Prop 139. It aims at enshrining abortion in the Arizona state constitution. This group is called Arizona for Abortion Access, filed a lawsuit in Maricopa County Superior Court in an effort to change the language on voter pamphlets about the ballot. They said that the current term unborn human being is politically charged. And they wanted it changed to something that was more medically accurate. Change it to the term fetus, because they want to take the humanity out of it. They know that by saying unborn human being, that's got to have a lot of humanity in it, seeing as how the word human is part of that. The Republican legislators who are opposing that said that the term unborn human being is actually based verbatim on what is currently used in Arizona's state law regarding abortion. So they have a pretty strong argument. Look, this is in the law. You want to amend the Constitution, you should probably use the language that we use in law, seeing as how the Constitution is the umbrella document by which we are drafting all the legislation. But the Maricopa County judge sided with the baby murder activists. And now they're going to change that to fetus. So we're going to dehumanize this, and it'll aid them in getting more and more people to vote to add baby murder to the Constitution of your state.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's that, dude. It's so crazy. You know, I mentioned it. I mentioned it earlier. The blood guilt that we have. Genesis 9:5-6 says, "And for your lifeblood I will require a reckoning. From every beast I will require it, and from man. From his fellow man I will require a reckoning for the life of man. Whoever sheds the blood of man, by man shall his blood be shed. For God made man in his own image." You've heard me say it before. Humans are God's greatest creation. He intentionally made humans his greatest creation to go and fulfill what he wanted from them, to glorify him and his kingdom. And now we're going to enshrine it in state law in Arizona that it's okay to murder. We're going to use the language, we're going to deceive, we're going to change it so we can do the opposite of what God wants. You don't think there's a blood guilt there? There absolutely is. If you're in Arizona, by the way, there's a church there called Apologia Church. Jeff Durbin is, I think, the lead pastor teacher there. It's one of my go-to churches for sermons, but they also do tons of great work as far as like street preaching, and oftentimes at these abortion mills. But obviously, even in their state, there's a lot of work to be done. He's spoken in front of the legislature there before. But this is it right here. This is how Satan works. He deceives people with the language. And this judge, this is another one. Isaiah 10:1. I think I've read this on the show before. "Woe to those who decree iniquitous decrees, and to the writers who keep writing oppression, to turn aside the needy from justice, and to rob the poor of my people of their right, that widows may be their spoil, and that they may make the fatherless their prey." Why were these Old Testament prophets so focused on the fatherless? And because typically speaking, say infanticide was completely outlawed in this country. Like, you couldn't get an abortion anywhere for any reason. Well, then maybe not lots, because maybe people would realize the precious gift that a child is once it's born, if they weren't so deceived. But maybe some or many would go into the foster care system or whatever else, and then they'd be orphans or fatherless to some degree. And then what? And I know that's another argument. Well, the system's already flooded. Okay, yeah. Well, again, it's not going to be easy. Nobody ever said it was going to be easy. But murder's your solution? Woe to you, the Bible says.
Now, to come off of the baby murder element of the life discussion, because the communists will consistently say, "Oh, you just want the babies to be born, but then you don't care about them as soon as they're born." No, actually, life matters at all stages, including when that last toe escapes the birth canal and they can't suck your brain out anymore, unless Kamala Harris gets her preferences. You alluded to "thou shalt not murder." It doesn't say "thou shalt not kill," because there is a time and a place for that. We Coming out of the law enforcement context, law enforcement officers are allowed to use deadly force when it's necessary, when the subject of the force presents an imminent threat of death or serious bodily injury to the officer or to another person. Same thing applies in a war context. And that's why this other state issue, I think, is worth digging into a little bit, because it is very disturbing. And this comes from Tim Awal's state of Minnesota. And it was a ruling about your ability to defend yourself in a threatening situation. So throw this up. This comes from the Washington Examiner. Minnesota Supreme Court. So it's settled law now within Tim Awal's home state. It says the Minnesota Supreme Court rules a person being threatened cannot brandish a weapon if reasonably possible to retreat. So now the onus is on the person who's threatened to run away, right? There's no right. The stand your ground law in Minnesota anymore. And the background for this was this guy, Early Romero Blevins. He pulled out a machete after a man with a knife allegedly threatened him on a rail platform in Minnesota. So Blevins was arguing with a woman. So this is our victim. He was actually arguing with a woman, and a guy came up to him with a knife and told him to come to a homeless shelter with him so that he could slice his throat. Blevins argued he pointed the machete at the woman and the two men because he feared for his safety. I don't know. It sounds like some crazy homeless people, but
Yep.
the overarching theme of do you have a duty to retreat, or can you stand your ground to defend your life? You're not being active, you're being reactive in this sort of scenario that's being laid out. He was tried and convicted of second-degree assault, fear with a dangerous weapon, and High Court rejected his claims of self-defense. It was a 4-2 decision after the lower court ruled that he had a reasonable opportunity to retreat and failed to do so. So lower court ruled it. Supreme Court affirmed the decision that now in the state of Minnesota, and how long before Vice President Tim Awals really pushes for this to be some sort of nationwide obligation, that you are not entitled to defend your life. Life doesn't matter. You have a duty to retreat from the person who wants to take it from you.
Yeah, it's again, it's just another example of wickedness prevailing. You mentioned our background as law enforcement officers or military people. You do have a right. I would argue you have a duty. You have a duty to not bear the sword in vain. I mean, that's what Romans 13 says. That's the verbiage from there is the government does not bear the sword in vain, but they're supposed to punish bad conduct and reward good. So, but you can extend that to yourself. If somebody breaks into your house, if somebody's threatening you, typically for the large part of our history as a nation, you've had the right to defend yourself, and rightfully so. It's completely insane to think that you wouldn't have that right. Now, I hope nobody listening, I hope even you and I don't ever have to get into a scenario where we have to make that decision again, because there will be a legal battle afterwards to some degree. And even if you're right, well, I'm not saying this homeless guy was right, but this law in Minnesota, man, Minnesota is off the rails. It's completely off the rails. I don't know if you've ever seen it. This week, Heidi and I, we watched The Fall of Minneapolis. I did not know a lot of that stuff.
I watched it.
It completely changed my what I thought I knew completely. It's like I now point to it as 20, like I knew 2020 was bad, and I knew the summer of 2020 was really bad across the nation, not just in Minneapolis, but the truth, the actual truth of what happened there, I now point to the summer of 2020 as the end. That's when America ended. And I thought it was more happening like now. But through COVID, and then that happened, like, it's crazy. That's just an aside. If you have the time, about an hour and a half, it's on YouTube even. I'm surprised it hasn't been nuked off of there, but it's also on Rumble. The Fall of Minneapolis. Give it a watch. But of course, it's coming from Tim Awals. I like that nickname, by the way. State. Like, what the heck, man? And like, Wisconsin is blue or purple. We're purple. I thought Minnesota was about the same. Minnesota's off the rails entirely, completely off the rails.
I lived in Iowa, which is a neighboring state to Minnesota. It might as well have been on the West Coast.
That's crazy.
And which nuts, because demographically they're actually very similar states. There was a lot of Vikings fans that lived in Iowa. I mean, that's just because of the proximity to the state. But ideologically, polar opposites, particularly where I was, because I was in Northwest Iowa, which is very, very conservative. But the overarching belief that you are not entitled to defend yourself, and there's room for subjectivity in there, because let's say that you are attacked and you do make an effort to retreat because I don't know, you're a coward or you're ill-equipped. I mean, maybe you're just outmatched. Maybe like, hey, this guy's got an AR and I have a pocket knife. I probably should run. um, but what if you stand your ground there, and then there's going to be a fight in the aftermath that says, like, you're giving not only a defense to the subject, but an affirmative defense, so they can say that they are actually the victim here. Yeah, you came at me with a gun, but you didn't have a right to defend yourself. You should have run away from me. In fact, I'm the victim here. That's the level of confusion that we are suffering from, because there's just an illogical approach to the way everything seems to be handled now, that I can't get my head around how we share a country going forward with people that that have this belief system that that is appropriate. And these are people who went to law school, theoretically high IQ people. They came to that conclusion.
I know it's crazy. I don't know how you get there. Like, just thinking about it from like a legal perspective, from the types of training and experiences that we have, or we have had. I really, I don't know how you get there. Is part of it because they're this woke mafia and they drink the Kool-Aid and they didn't get trained properly from a legal perspective when they were at Yale or Harvard? That there's could be some of that there.
Maybe it's
Could it
critical
be?
theory, like everything just needs to be torn down no matter what, because we don't need anything to be logical.
Right. And then but too, it's like, just look at the history of our laws. And I know some of these people will argue that our laws aren't rooted in biblical law. Well, they are. I mean, if you go back through the history of even how the founders wrote the Constitution, why they wrote the Bill of Rights the way they did, and then you start peeling back the layers of that onion. I got some of the books back here. There's one by a guy named Samuel Rutherford from Scotland. It's called Lex Rex, and there's other. You got John Locke. Like, if you look into the history of this, it's rooted in biblical tradition and biblical law. And here's another perfect example: Exodus 22, 2-3. If a thief, so we're not even talking about somebody attacking you, but just coming in to take your things. So this is like castle doctrine. This is where we get it from. If a thief is found breaking in and is struck so that he dies, so they break into your home and you defend yourself, because you don't know that they're just there to steal. You don't know. I mean, what are they breaking into your house for? But it says, is struck so that he dies, there shall be no blood guilt for him. Yes, because the thief was the one in the wrong. They shouldn't be breaking in. And then it says, but if the sun has risen on him, so it says, there shall be blood guilt for him. He shall surely pay. So if he has nothing, then he shall be sold for his theft. So basically, it's saying you have that right. And of course you do. Of course you do. Why wouldn't you? Why wouldn't you have that right to defend yourself, your family, your property from people who are already violating the law? Like, we have laws about theft and robbery, or about brandishing a knife, or about claiming, hey, come with me, I'm going to slit your throat. We already have those laws. And so now you're going to be found in the trick bag if you defend yourself and didn't flee. It's completely asinine and turned on its head.
It seems to me that if somebody comes up to you in a situation that is threatening, you can choose to either stand your ground or to run away. So this is a anti-choice ruling from people who would argue that they are the most pro-choice out there. Uh, I have one more story, and I think we can connect it because it doesn't pertain to baby murder or even standing your ground, but it pertains to safety and the obsession with safety now. And
Oh.
Garrett always does his sheep impression. Just give it for us. Give it to us.
It's for your safety. Your safety, Steve.
This comes from the Mises Institute, and they're a libertarian mind think tank. And this is an interesting piece by them. It's "Fear is the Mind Killer: America's
Oh, I
Dangerous
love that.
Obsession
You know
with."
where that comes from? Fear is the
No,
Mind Killer. Another book back here on my shelf, Dune. That comes from the Dune Chronicles by Frank Herbert. It's kind of like a mantra that is found early on in the first book and then kind of throughout. It's a lot, Fear is the Mind Killer is how it starts. I feel like I used to have it memorized. Dune, very influential book in my life.
well, to me, what's interesting about safety as it pertains to the conversation we're having about life today is that it's counterintuitive, because we are a culture that is not focused on life right now. They're actually embracing death and death of our progeny, right? But to me, if you are embracing death for your progeny, you better keep what you got now, right? Keep it as safe as possible, preserve it as long as possible, delay the inevitable decline that will come about. And there's also an element of, well, I made it out of the birth canal, so I'm just going to kick that door closed behind me, right? That's that guy's problem before he's ever had an opportunity here. And Mises looks at the different angles of safety that we have. And I think they're just worth throwing out there and maybe getting a reaction out. It says, in modern America, an obsessive fixation on safety has given rise to a culture of fear, paralyzing action, and warping decision making across all levels of society, to the point where we basically put knee pads on kids. Right? It's a little absurd. The conditioning begins early, with children trained to be fearful rather than competent in facing challenges or unfamiliar situations. Corporations establish the claim that safety is our highest priority, which parenthetically, Mike Rowe has I think he sells t-shirts that say safety third. And it's sort of a dig of, if safety is the prime directive, you're never going to get anything done, because it's
No.
way safer to never try anything, right?
Yep.
But without irony, governments use safety of the citizens as a pretext to commit brutal acts of war and strip away natural freedoms at the point of a gun. Like, you should stay inside, or Tim AWOL's National Guard is going to fire on you
Yeah.
for your own
Well,
safety.
yeah, that's another great one, because that video started to make the rounds again since he was announced as the VP candidate. They were the National Guard, and I think the video I saw was police. They're shooting paintball rounds at people out on their porch who are recording. That's your First Amendment right, to record the government in the capacity of their official duty. Oh, and they're in public. So just as it pertains to the government, it's called the plain view doctrine. They're in plain view out in public. So you can record them. Heck, you can buy a dash cam for yourself on Amazon and turn it on, and wherever you're driving around, you can record, because it's public view. You can take a cell phone out and just record people on the sidewalk. They may not like it. They may call the cops themselves, but guess what? You can record them. That's how the First Amendment works. And
This is
and
for
now,
your safety as we send rounds at you and scream,
yes,
light them up.
get back inside, light them up. It's like, wait, what is this? Again, help me, someone, help me.
Well,
How does that have anything to do with COVID? I'm standing on my porch recording you so you can shoot freaking paintball rounds at me? It's insane. It's insane.
and Mice has even referenced World War I, where Wilson sent troops off to die to make the world safe for democracy, right?
Yeah.
Safety.
Well, that's another safety. Think of so when we were on SWAT, we had to wear iPro, right? Like, whenever you made an entry or whatever, you had to wear eye protection. And a lot of the time, well, maybe not a lot, because whatever. I would wear sunglasses or whatever if it was sunny, so I'd have them on anyways. But for any operation, like, you had to have iPro on. And for me, a lot of the time, the iPro made it harder to see because it's getting foggy, it's getting sweaty. But that was the SOP. You had to have it on. I'm good with the helmet and the vest and the gun,
The,
for my safety and defense.
the helmet, which has no ballistic protection at all. I mean,
Yeah.
I asked him, I said, is there anything? They said, no, it's just so you don't bump your head on a door frame.
I'm not gonna bump my head, and if I do, like, hey, that's kind of the signal, like, hey, duck your head more next time. But also, when I was in the army, had to wear eye pro, and a lot of the time, if you're out during the day, you're wearing sunglasses anyways. And what we had was similar to what we had in the FBI, where it has a ballistic grade protection to some degree. And actually, we had a guy who he stepped on an IED, and the eye pro probably to some degree did save him from going completely blind. He lived. Anyways, that's a different story for another time, probably. But other than that, though, like, you're constantly taking it off to wipe your head, and it's the same thing. It's getting fogged up, and at night, like, you got your iPro on, and then you've got your nods down, and it's like, well, I can't see through my iPro, through my nods, and to walk around the freaking rocky mountainous terrain or whatever. But it's your safety, and it's like, well, wait a second. Wait 1 second. What do you mean it's for my safety? I'm an infantryman in Iraq or Afghanistan. This is inherently dangerous. Like, and I'm okay with that. That's what I signed up for. It's nuts, dude. The safety stuff. But yeah, man, you see it. We do have. I was listening to. We actually had one of our whatever 007 probably in the chat. I should check. But he messaged me and said, hey, you got to listen to this podcast, and it's episode 124, Sean Ryan. It's a Navy SEAL commander. I forget his first name. Captain Geary is I think he's a captain. I don't know, whatever. His last name is Geary. Long story. It's a very long episode, but he was talking about this because he was like on a ship, and he like hopped down like 4 feet. And like the one of his, it was like an old friend. They both moved up through the ranks. I think he's like I forget what his rank was, but he's like, hey, you can't do that. And he's like, what do you mean? He's like, what did I do? He's like, you can't jump down like that. And he's like, why not? And he's like, well, they have safety rules on the ship that you can't do. But he's like, hey, considering who you are, you're SEAL Team 6 or whatever, like you're probably not even going to get talked to. But if I did that and jumped down like that, like somebody up above is watching, and like if they saw that, like I'd get hemmed up and chewed out and probably written up. And he's like, you guys have fighter jets that are taking off and landing on this ship that is moving in the middle of the ocean, and you can't hop down 4 feet. Why not? And he's like, I don't know. It's just a rule. It's safety. And that made me think of my army time too. Like we had this rule, like if you were on top of a vehicle, you had to have 3 point of contact at all times. So 2 hands and a foot, 2 feet and a hand, your butt and a hand or whatever. And so whenever you're moving around, like you always, if you were standing straight up and only had your feet, like you're prone to get chewed out. And it's like, well, I don't intend on falling off of this thing. Like I get some of the safety, but like I'll use my brain and I'll be safe. Like you have to have a rule. It's insane, the safety stuff.
My favorite eye protection story from SWAT was when they tried to make us wear masks during the coronavirus stuff, and they got us multicam masks. God knows how much they spent on them.
Yeah.
And already your eye protection is going to get fogged up because it was like in the winter time or early spring in the Midwest. So it's still cold. And then I just remember guys putting the masks on and then immediately their eyes fogged up, but the mask was for their safety. So you're not allowed to take it off. So you can't see going into a theoretically a dangerous situation where the SWAT team is necessary, but you better not take that mask off. That was the perspective of the
Yeah.
FBI SWAT
Yeah.
leadership.
That's it. It's for your safety again, right? Well, the COVID, we don't want you to get COVID.
Yeah, after you sat in a Bearcat with 12 other guys for an
Uh-huh.
hour.
Dude, so we've mentioned this before. The first time I met Steve, unbeknownst to either of us, I guess we probably didn't even really meet, but we first time we interacted or ever saw each other was at my SWAT tryout because Omaha and Kansas City did them together. We were in West Des Moines, Iowa for these, and it was our tryout was supposed to be in like February or March of 2020. Ended up getting punted because of COVID, or was this 2021? I don't know, 2020 I think, and it got punted to like June. And so it's like peak COVID, June of 2020, and all these stupid policies and guidelines are in place. And like we're getting smoked and we're in close proximity to one another. Most of the time we're not wearing a mask, but at one point we had to go in the Bearcat. And I remember he ended up becoming my SWAT team leader. He was like, all right, guys, we talked about this, and the decision that the bosses back at the field office came up with were like, you got to wear a mask when you're in the Bearcat. Like, hey, I get it. Like, I know it's hot. I know you've been working out all day, but just while you're in here, because it's such a close proximity, you got to wear a mask. And like you could tell that he knew it was dumb. He knew it was stupid, but like they weren't going to let him have the tryout. Like, which even that, Steve, like, and you know this from your time, like you're trying out for SWAT, you're in the best condition that you've been in either in a while, maybe in your life, because it's going to be hard and rigorous. I know for me, like I was in probably the best shape of my life, if not the best shape I've been in since I was in the army. And it's like, I'm not sick. None of these guys are sick. Like we wouldn't have been here if we were. We've been by each other, sweating on each other. We're like carrying each other at one point. But we got to wear a mask when we're in here. Like, where are the people with the brains? But it's for your safety.
It's a few more examples in this Mises article. We'll bang them out real quick here. And we actually did accidentally just go into the coronavirus. That was one of the elements of it. That was the
Of
next one.
course.
But that's goes without saying that was way over the top. Talks about the economic safety and how the Federal Reserve is supposed to be handling employment and inflation and to make sure that the economy is nice and safe. They don't uh, really unleash the American economy. We're more worried about just having safety underneath the Federal Reserve's watch. We can't possibly have any instability, right? We have to ensure the stability of the banking system. But despite that, there was a Great Depression that was under the Fed's watch. So how good of a job are they really? Then there was the forcible redistribution of capital in the form of welfare system. Right? We have to have safety nets, right? And then the war on terror, which touched on a little bit, but it reduced freedoms at home while creating an increasingly aggressive enemies elsewhere. And I would even contend increasingly aggressive enemies on the home front in the form of a weaponized government.
Oh, for sure. For sure. I don't know why this popped up, but have you ever heard of this terror documentary? It's old now. Like the clip I saw on YouTube just the other day was like 9 years ago, but there's this documentary called Terror, and the T is in parentheses. So like, cause then it's like T error. And it's like, oh yeah. And it's all about this confidential human source from the FBI who they were paying. They kind of coerced him into it by saying, hey, we're going to double your salary. He was living in quote unquote safe houses that FBI was paying for. And then out of nowhere, they move him from New York to South Carolina. But he didn't tell his handlers that he was like, because I think he realized like it was wrong and was like he was entrapping people. And that's exactly what he was doing. And so I was like, I
He's
don't
a
know why.
source with a soul, with a
Yeah.
conscience.
Yeah, and I don't know like the end result because like it was just a short clip I saw, but it's like, yeah, we had that too, and now look at how that has spawned out of utter control.
A government informant with a heart of gold stepped away. All right. So a little bit long today, but I do think that it was worth going into detail about this life issue. I do have a palate cleanse that I think we can weave into it. But Garrett, any parting thoughts here before we get to that?
Um, I know this will be it for me, and I know I was going heavy with scripture today. I hope that's appreciated. I mean, if I had it my way, and maybe I will someday, I'll do something solo where that's all I do. But I've read this before. It's Proverbs 6:16-19. There are 6 things that the Lord hates, 7 that are an abomination to him: haughty eyes, a lying tongue, hands that shed innocent blood, a heart that devises wicked plans, feet that make haste to run to evil, a false witness who breathes out lies, and one who sows discord among brothers. I think we've touched on just about every single one of those because a lot of them are wrapped up into a number of the topics we covered. But your government is hastily running towards evil and wickedness, and they certainly are shedding innocent blood. And we will have a blood debt that will be paid at some point for that.
Well, our government is hastily running in the wrong direction towards a target that is to the south of us, which is going to lead us to today's palate cleanse. This is the Venezuelan diet. Hopefully, we don't get to that point, but if we do, I guess we'll all be a little bit skinnier.
Want to lose weight without drugs, pills, or human rights? Then come to Venezuela, the most effective weight loss solution in history. Other diets are unrealistic. Regardless of how hard you try, your country still has food. But thanks to an ancient Soviet secret, we found a way. Here's how. Our government price controls lead, as they always do, to food shortages, leaving you unable to eat late at night, or most other times.
Gee, that sounds great! But won't I miss America?
Please, we have plenty in common. You'll still find yourself standing in line for the latest release at the Apple Store. Like ESPN, we've gotten rid of some on-air talent, and we might be getting a Cracker Barrel. Look, there it is!
I'm a journalist. Is Venezuela right for me?
Of course! We've created designated free speech zones just for you. You won't believe how many calories you'll burn. Recycling, doing CrossFit, and taking community walks.
Isn't that a violent protest?
No, they're shooting a Pepsi commercial.
Oh, that makes sense.
But don't just take my word for it. Listen to one of our success stories.
We have no toilet paper, but it's okay because we have no food.
When God closes a door, he opens a window.
There is pie on window?
Learn how you can go from this to this. From this to this. From this. Well, what they've created in Venezuela is a socialist paradise. To this. What you had in Venezuela wasn't technically socialism. It was, Chavezism. Venezuela. Try it today.
No.
No, I don't want that. I don't want it either.
No, we do not. Hopefully, we can course correct here. But that's a conversation for another day, I guess, or to be continued at least, as we are just going to continue to harp on this issue until somebody takes notice. So that's going to do it for us
So
today.
share AMRAD with your friends.
Share it, guys. Share it. We appreciate the thumbs up. We appreciate the follows of channels. And if anybody is listening in the audio format, do subscribe so you get the updates. And the AMRAD podcast will be back with you next week, 8:30 on Tuesday. Until then, enjoy the rest of your weekend.
You've been listening to the voice of the Suspendables on the American Radicals podcast. Follow us on rumble.com/AmRadPod.